What is up, you guys? Taylor checking in for UFC on ABC 5. Got a headliner between the very promising potential future champion Ilia Topuria taking on a proven veteran in Josh Emmett. Fight card taking place in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, this is a fight card that doesn't necessarily have the biggest of names throughout it, but if you ask me, this is a very stacked card. You're talking about a lot of up-and-coming talent, a lot of promising fighters, a lot of fighters that deliver when they're in the cage. So I am very excited for this fight card. As you guys see, I brought the muscle shirt out. Make no mistake, there ain't no Daryl Schoonover type of stuff going on here. There ain't no titties. This is that Scott Steiner, Buff Bagwell, pump going on over here. So none of you guys get that twisted before we jump into the first fight. And also, before we do that, real quick, please like this video for me. It helps in a major way. Subscribe to the channel if you guys have not already, and catch me on all my social media. It's all there scrolling below. All right, guys, let's go slide over to this first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
The first fight we're going to be talking about is taking place in the featherweight division. We got Jamall Emmers taking on Jenkins. Now, you guys see what I was talking about in the intro, right? We're talking about very high caliber fighters here that are not really known at the moment. They're not necessarily big household names, but us diehard fans, we know the capabilities of a Jamall Emmers, and we know how promising a fighter like Jenkins looks. We know how well-rounded and dangerous he is. And if you don't know, well, that's why you're tuned into the show. Jamall Emmers, he did drop the ball in his Dana White's Contender Series fight back in the day. He got finished by Julian Erosa. He went back to the drawing board, got some W's over in the LFA. He's coming off a huge victory, as he's been back in the UFC, over a very hyped up and promising fighter, the Chechenian Ashkabov there. And Jamall Emmers just showed how well-rounded he is and how technical his striking is. Unfortunately for Jamall Emmers, he just hasn't stayed active. He's barely averaging over one fight per year since 2020. He's been locked in there with the likes of Giga Chikazi. Fought a very tough fight there, a very close fight. It went to a split decision. He didn't get the nod there. Got caught by Pat Sabatini in a heel hook very early on. We know that Pat Sabatini is a very dangerous grappler. Just some unfortunate situations there. I mean, I really hope that he has his head fully devoured in the game right now, because he is a talented fighter. And again, you could say the same thing for Jenkins, coming off a big victory on Dana White's Contender Series, where he took out Don Shainis. Don Shainis also fought in the UFC for a couple seconds before he was finished there by Sadiq Yusuf. But Jenkins, a very technical striker, a very well-rounded fighter, right? When you take a look at the work he's done as a pro, a lot of mixed results, knockouts, submissions, decisions, using his grappling. When you break down the tape on him, you see that he's a very fine-tuned fighter, and he just looked very good in his last fight there, against Don Shainis, which was on the Dana White's Contenders series there. Besides that, not a lot of high-level opponents on his resume, so obviously he still needs to prove himself. And Jamall Emmers is a big step up. In my opinion, if you take a look at the competition that he's been facing against, it's a big step up. Jamall Emmers is also going to have a 6-inch reach advantage. You also need to take into consideration, we talked about how Jenkins is a well-rounded fighter, has grappling in his back pocket. Well, check this out. Jamall Emmers has put up a 100% takedown defensive rate in the octagon, right? This is a fighter that's very capable of keeping the fight standing. And I think that we're going to see this fight play out on the feet. For the most part. Also, when you take into consideration that Jenkins doesn't mind a striking affair, right? He feels he's a very polished striker as well. I think we see both these guys throw down on the feet. And again, when we take a look back to that reach advantage that Jamall Emmers has, that beautiful jab that he pumps, I think that if he's on his P's and Q's, this is a fight that he can take via decision. I do believe that. I think that Jenkins has proven to be tough. And I think that the jab will come into play here. There are some major question marks. Again, this is a step up in competition for Jenkins. Maybe Jenkins does rise to the occasion and show that he is a very promising fighter. If he goes out here and takes out Emmers, the hype will be very real. And now we take a look at the betting line, right? Right now, Jamall Emmers, he opened up as a -178 on Jazz Sports, and very, very minuscule movement right now. He's a -175. Really nothing to talk about there. I mean, he's a -175 favorite. On Bet Online, he opened as a -170, went down to a -150. So some action coming in on Jenkins, and then it corrects itself, goes all the way back to 170 and then to 175. I have a feeling that that line will stay roughly or around that spot. Maybe it settles in -165. Maybe we see some people respecting the abilities of Jenkins. In my opinion, that line might be a little bit too high for my liking. Again, I mean, we'll see uh, how Emmers comes into this fight as far as with his fight IQ and where his head's at. Training at a Pinnacle MMA, we know he's been putting in a lot of work with the likes of Darian Caldwell, as you see him there. Lorenz Larkin's been training with Bobby Green as of recently. There's a lot of talented fighters over there, but I just hope that they have the right game plan and that they are mentally on point for this fight, because Jenkins, I do believe, is a threat to finish the fight if you're not on your P's and Q's and you make some mistakes in the cage there. So I think maybe the line might be a little bit high for my liking, but Emmers is a very talented fighter, and I still will lean his way for him to pump that jab and get a decision victory. So Trevor Peek was initially supposed to be taking on Victor Martinez, which had all the makings to be a fan-pleasing fight. Most likely we were going to see a knockout there. Well, Victor Martinez did just withdraw from this fight. In steps Jose Mariscal. If you guys aren't familiar with him, this is a fighter that is a very entertaining fighter as well, fighting at a team elevation, and he's been locked in there with some big names. So this fight really doesn't lose any of the hype. This is another very fun matchup for Trevor Peek. You guys know I love me some Trevor Peek. I had that big time play on him, that free play that I gave here on the channel, and of course he came through with the knockout prop as well. Trevor Peek just goes in there and looks to annihilate his opponents. Now, definitely has some major flaws in his game, and we saw that even in his last fight where he had the W there. We'll talk about that fight more in a second. But, you know, as we pull the numbers up here, again, this was against his initial opponent and Victor Martinez. I mean, you see both men landing up in the 8s, 8.33 significant strikes, 8.65 significant strikes per minute, both of them absorbing a ridiculous amount. You know, I don't have the numbers on Jose Mariscal, but I expect those numbers to be very similar to what you see here when you break down his tape. I mean, this is a guy that goes to war. So I just want to reiterate that this is a fight. The new matchup is a fight that really loses no momentum. This is going to be a very exciting fight. Jose coming off a 3-fight winning streak, fighting over in Cage Warriors and coming off a victory in LFA. He's been in there with some big names. I just want to let you guys know some of the names that he's been in there with. He's a battle-tested fighter. Hasn't necessarily been getting his hand raised in those fights, but he's been in there with some big names. Sean Seriano, ex-UFC fighter, got knocked out by Steve Garcia, got knocked out by Joe Anderson Brito. Joe Anderson Brito did him dirty. If you guys were able to pull up that fight there, Joe Anderson Brito hit him with the low blow and then almost finished him there. Finally, the ref steps in. He was way too slow with breaking them up. Then they start things off again, and Brito starches him and knocks him out. Again, we talked about Steve Garcia getting the finish on him there. A little bit of an early stoppage, but there's no question that Garcia was landing. I do believe that Jose has some defensive flaws, and I think that Peek will look to capitalize and do what he does best, just make it a war and land those big shots and stop this fight in the first round. But at the same time, you know, I said I wanted to circle back into Trevor Peek's last performance, you know, the fight that we mentioned that we cashed on, where he got that first round knockout against Eric Gonzalez. At the very last second of the fight, had the victory against Malik Lewis in the second round, one of the very few times he's passed the first round. You know, in that fight against Gonzalez, Trevor Peek went out there, went balls to the wall, and, you know, he did seem to be breathing a little bit heavily towards the end of that first round. Even though he does seem to have good cardio, he puts so much output out there, and he's sloppy with his strikes. He's really sloppy with his strikes, and we've definitely seen some signs of some low fighter IQ. And I think that once he faces off against a cerebral veteran, they're going to avoid all that early onslaught, and then they're eventually going to take this fight over in the late rounds. I think that if an opponent can look to pump the jab and throw leg kicks from the outside and just throw clean shots and can be composed while you have this tornado twirling around you, I think that Trevor Peek is going to run into some real trouble. In the meantime, I mean, his fights are going to be fun, and I think that he'll still get some knockouts in the UFC. I'm not really sure how long he hangs around in the UFC if he doesn't sharpen up his overall skill set. I'll tell you guys that. And you know, in his opponent here, coming off those 3 victories, hasn't really had a lot of big victories against notable names. Was on the USA kickboxing team, you know, 2 pro MMA titles on the regional scene, 11 amateur titles, an IMMA AF US national world champion. I mean, this is a guy that is battle tested. There's just no question about that. You know, it's 13-6. He has 19 pro fights. He's 30 years old. This isn't some rookie that's going to be intimidated as Trevor Peek looks to go out in there and starch him. So I do worry for Trevor Peek's sake that Jose Mariscal weathers the early storm and then takes this fight over. But he's taking this fight on short notice. I'm a big fan of Trevor Peek's. And you know what? I'm going to edge Trevor Peek here. I'm going to say, based on the defensive flaws that I've seen from Jose Mariscal, I'm going to say that Trevor Peek can potentially capitalize there and get a knockout. And I'll go first round knockout, man. Why not? Trevor Peek is going to go out there and he's going to look to get that first round knockout. At least I know that he'll give it a full attempt. I'll take him for the first round knockout for my pick here. And we do not have a betting line on this fight right now. This fight was just announced again, so we wonder the shape that Mariscal is coming into as well, coming into this fight. And Peek is going to be pushing the pace on him early, so he better be in shape. Give me Trevor Peek first round knockout. Randy Rude Boy Brown looking to get back in the winner's circle, coming off a tough loss against one of the top prospects in the fight game right now, Jack Della Maddalena. He'll be taking on Wellington Turman. Wellington Turman coming down from the middleweight division down to the welterweight division. You guys are familiar with Wellington Turman. Not a lot of success in the octagon. Mostly known as of recently for being a fighter that regularly is in the circle of Glover Teixeira and Alex Pereira, right? So he's learning from some of the greats in the sport, and he's still only 26 years old. That's the one thing that's going for him. So he has time to refine some of his overall skill set. He's a decently well-rounded fighter. I think that he's lacking defensively with his striking. He has some submission skills. Randy Brown, I think that Randy Brown is a very good fighter. It's just that when you compare him to the top tier fighters, to the top 15, he's gonna struggle because I just don't think that he's that type of dude. But when you're talking about the middle of the pack in the division or towards the bottom of the division, Randy Brown's definitely a guy that can go out there and give those types of men some major trouble. Randy Brown's a very well-rounded fighter. He has submission skills. Obviously, his striking is his bread and butter. He's very quick and he's very, very lengthy. When you take a look at the frame, going into this fight, he's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage. He has a 78-inch wingspan in the welterweight division. He's very tall. He's 6'3", 75 inches. He'll have a 3-inch height advantage over Wellington Turman. So even though Wellington Turman's the fighter that's coming down in weight, there's no real size advantage or anything like that going on in this matchup here. I think that Randy Brown will get the better of the striking exchanges, although he does have to be careful. We've seen Brown clip before. We've seen him hit with some big shots, and I think that Turman will go out here and look to land some big shots with his hands. Potentially, he can pull that off. We just saw Randy Brown submitted in his last fight against Jack Della Maddalena. I talked about the fact that Turman does have some submission skills as well. That's something that you do want to keep an eye on. Wellington Turman coming off that decision loss against Andre Petroski. Before that, pulled off the Kimura on Misha Cirkunov as Cirkunov made his way down to the middleweight division. A decision victory over Sam Alvey. That's never really saying much. And then losses to Bruno Silva, Andrew Sanchez, Carl Robertson. Not the best look. His biggest win in the octagon is without a doubt Misha Cirkunov. And I guess you could also throw Marcus Perez in the mix to a decision victory there. Not a lot going on, in my opinion. I do like the fact that he brings the fight, but Turman needs to show us something. A victory over Randy Brown would be very big for his career here. Again, he's an aggressive fighter. He's a dangerous fighter. But I got to go at Randy Brown. I got to go at Randy Brown in this spot. I know he's going to be extremely, extremely hungry and motivated going into this matchup. Again, his stock's a little bit down based on the fact that he's coming off the loss against Jack Della Maddalena, but you have to understand how talented Jack is. And even early on in that fight, he was landing a little bit. He's very fast with the striking. I got Randy Brown to get the job done here. Randy Brown, he is a pretty big favorite. He's a minus 270 right now. My bookie opened up as a minus 243. Action coming his way. Maybe somewhat surprising. I would be a little surprised if we see Brown touch the minus 300 range. Just coming off the loss and all that, I think I would be a little surprised to see that. That line's a little bit too high for me. Again, taking into consideration that Turman's learning from these greats, really greats when you think about it, and that he's so young. So you're going to see him continue to progress, and you're going to see his skill set get better and better. And I think that he's still somewhat of a dangerous fighter, and I could see these guys really clashing here. Other than that, real quick, you take a look at Randy Brown's losses, the 5 losses, 2 via knockout, 2 via sub, 1 decision. So he's the same way he's diverse with his finishes, he's diverse with his losses. So he has to be careful in a variety of ways. Wellington Turman, or 7 submission victories out of his 18. That's a lot. Almost half of his victories via submission. 3 knockouts as well. Give me Randy Brown here. I wouldn't be shocked if we see an under in this fight or if we see a finish. Um, uh, but at the same time, Wellington Turman has shown to be pretty durable in his 6 losses. Only 2 via finish, 2 knockouts. Maybe Randy Brown can land some heavy kicks or whatnot. No, when it's all said and done, actually, I will say Randy Brown via decision. I think the length gives problems. Turman has shown to be pretty durable. Let me clarify that. I want to say Randy Brown via decision. I like the decision victory there for Randy Brown spot. Tafa gang in the house. We got the older brother, Justin Tafa. Still only 29 years old. He's been around for a while. Taking on Austen Lane, who's now 35 years old. Austen Lane has a very interesting story, if you ask me. I want to kick things off by talking about him a little bit. Austen Lane is a fighter that is really known for getting starched by Greg Hardy, right? And Greg Hardy's Dana White's Contender Series debut, and in Austen Lane's Dana White's Contender Series debut. Austen Lane is a fighter that had or has the football background. They talked about that a little bit, but you're talking about a guy that was a very, compared to Greg Hardy, an NFL Pro Bowler, I believe. Austen Lane, a very lower level type of football player. I believe he played in college and whatnot. And, I think the fact that he has reached this spot right now shows his mental toughness. I think that he's a very mentally tough fighter. He got starched by Greg Hardy. He got knocked out again after that as well. Continued to stay on the path, on the regional scene, and eventually started to string off some W's. Just take a quick look here. I mean, he's coming into this fight on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fight winning streak. Just had the victory on Dana White's Contender Series back in September there, and of 2022. And he's going out here and he's also finishing fights. In all these victories, we're talking about all of them being by way of knockout, and also one of them being by way of submission. Not necessarily crazy about the level of competition. Maybe the name that stands out the most is Juan Adams. Shout out to my boy Juan Adams. We know that he's a big heavyweight fighter that has a serious wrestling pedigree as well when you mix in the size factor. And Austen Lane weathered the storm there and did get that finish in the 4th round. That was a very tough fight there for Juan Adams. I remember that at the time. Back in 2021. So again, Austen Lane, a fighter that is probably going to come into this fight with the edge as far as the athleticism, the quickness, and all that. He has a 6-inch reach advantage. He's obviously the taller fighter. But then when you talk about a guy in Justin Tafa, he has proven that he is a very technical striker. You saw it with his brother, Junior Tafa, too. I mean, he let the moment get to him. He got a little bit overzealous. He was putting a little bit too much oomph in his shots. He should have paced himself. But you saw even the technical abilities with the striking there as well. These guys, they know how to throw down on the feet. They kind of see things in slow motion. Specifically Justin Tafa, because he's a seasoned UFC fighter at this point. So he doesn't get overwhelmed when he's in the cage right now. He's seeing things in slow motion. And we saw that in his last fight where he had a big-time knockout victory against my boy, Porker Porter. Knocked him out in the 1st round. We saw Porker bounce back with a victory there. Had a 1st-round knockout over Harry Honeysuckle, a.k.a. Harry Hunsucker. Losses to Jared Vandera and Carlos Felipe. Also a loss to Jorgen De Castro. Those didn't look the best at the time. Also has a knockout over Juan Adams, a common opponent there. Feel bad for my boy Juan there. The first fighter I've had an interview with, if you guys remember that, MMA Live Discussion. But still, Juan Adams is doing his thing. He'll be all right. I think that Tafa is the best version of himself without a doubt right now as he creeps up to the 30-year-old mark. I will favor that he can keep this fight standing. I will favor that. That's going to be the big X factor here. I don't think Austen Lane's going to have much success in the feet. I know he's been working on his striking. He's explosive and he's quick and all that, but Tafa will land much heavier shots and much cleaner shots. And I think that he has great potential to get another knockout victory here against Austen Lane. And that's the route I'm going. I'm going to say Tafa gets the knockout here. Let's take a look at this betting line and see what we're talking about. Justin Tafa, depending on which book you're looking at, but we're going to take a look right here at my bookie. Justin Tafa opened up as a -149 favorite, and right now he is a -178 favorite. So obviously action going towards Justin Tafa's way. The comeback on Austen Lane roughly right now from that +140 to +150 range. Again, opened up as a +117. People not really believing in that line there. So action coming in on Tafa. He's just a more refined fighter. He's a guy that's been around the fight game a lot longer, whereas Austen Lane was the athlete that started learning the fight game. But at this point in time, I guess you could safely say that he's a true fighter. I mean, he's making that UFC debut. I think it's going to be a tough fight for him there as this fight plays out on the feet. So he'll have to mix things up. But give me Justin Tafa via knockout. Maybe we see a late first round knockout or an early second round knockout there. But if Tafa doesn't get that knockout, and if he struggles with his cardio and Austen Lane is in on the hips and just continues to push the pace, if he comes in phenomenal shape, this could be a tough fight for Tafa. Maybe we see a decision victory Lane there. Hey guys, real quick, I hope you're following me on Instagram. I'm on Twitter as well, but Instagram is my shit. You guys know that. I've been posting these posts. Pretty cool. You guys got $6 to work with. You got the $3 heavyweights, $2 and $1 heavyweights. I'm throwing these out there for all different weight classes. I'm swapping the fighters. It's fun. Who would you guys pick in this scenario? Pick 3 fighters. You got $6 to work with. Pick your trio. Imagine it's a 3 versus 3 MMA fight like we've seen in Russia and whatnot. I want to know who you guys are picking for your 3. I'm going with Sergey Pavlovich. I'll throw 3 on him. I'll take Alexander Volkov for $2 there. And then I'll go Augusta Sakai, actually. I'll take Augusta Sakai there with that extra dollar. So who would you guys take? Let me know. Go catch me on Instagram at MMAFortuneteller_. In the welterweight division, we got 2 very rangy fighters. Neil Magny, the number 11th ranked welterweight in the world, a guy that's been around the block for a long time, still only 35 years old. This isn't a fighter that's necessarily past his days of hanging around in the division. I think he still has a little bit of time here, especially when you take into the consideration that the type of training this guy puts in, the shape that he's in, and this isn't a guy that's messing around outside the cage. This isn't a guy that's drinking, smoking, or any of that. This is a very disciplined guy, Neil Magny. Phil Rowe, a very talented striker. Again, we talked about the ranginess of both these guys. Neil Magny, 80-inch wingspan. Philip Rowe, an 80.5-inch wingspan. Philip Rowe has shown that he's a talented striker. We've seen him get a variety of knockouts in the cage. He's 32 years old, even though he's relatively new to the octagon. Came off Dana White's contender series, and then has fought in the UFC a couple times. Hasn't been extremely active. I was cage side for his last fight there against Nico Price. That was a very fun fight. I was actually sitting right behind, I don't know if it was his brother, cousin, or one of his best friends, but it was kind of cool. He had a bunch of his boys from his gym there, but there was one dude specifically that was kind of sitting towards the side, and I was just kind of sitting in his chair. Everybody else was standing up. He was sitting down, and I saw Phil Rowe continuously going up to the cage and specifically looking at him, and they were kind of doing some sign language stuff to each other. They were talking in between rounds. I think it might have been his brother. It was someone that was close to him, and it was pretty cool because if you remember, Phil Rowe went through some adversity early on in that fight, but eventually got the knockout in the 3rd round. So imagine seeing his brother. I was like 2 rows behind him. I saw him right there in front of me, and they were ecstatic. So coming off a big victory, had the knockout victory over Jason Witt. Jason Witt, the wrestler, definitely lacking with his striking there, but, give some credit for the knockout there. I'm not really too high on Jason Witt. Before that, these were grappling matches here. I actually had a grappling match against Gordon Ryan. His last fight before that, though, was Orion Kosi. He had another knockout victory there. So he's been doing his thing dating back to the Gabriel Green decision loss. That was the one lone loss that he's really had under the UFC banner. Listen, Neil Magny, 35 years old, looks to be in phenomenal shape here. I know that he's only won 1 of his last 3 fights, but take a look at the level of competition on those 2 losses. Gilbert Burns and Shavkat Rakhmonov. I'm not putting him under the fire for those losses. Looked great in the Daniel Rodrigues fight, once again showing his cardio and the pace that he could push upon his fighters. Has great volume on the feet. Defensively, he's sharp enough that I think he could avoid that big shot from Phil Rowe. I'm going to call him Will Smith there. I mean, that's his doppelganger. But I think he could avoid that big shot. And I think that Neil Magny is a more well-rounded fighter. I think that the grappling, the pace and all that, I think that I got to edge Neil Magny in the spot here. I have a world of respect for a guy like Neil Magny, honestly. I mean, I just been watching him from a long time back, right? From the Ultimate Fighter. And, if you just want to understand what kind of fighter we're talking about here, and he's going to be hungry coming off that loss. He wants to get back in the win column. But as of recently, victories over Max Griffin, over Jeff Neal, the very dangerous Jeff Neal. Okay, so if you're worried about the striking of Phil Rowe, I mean, Jeff Neal is a killer on the feet. He was able to stifle him there and work his magic. A victory over Robbie Lawler, Tony Martin, the Leech, Li Jinglang. He was knocked out by Santiago Ponzinibbio, but, Ponzinibbio will do that to you. I just love I love the experience that he has going into this fight. Spending locked in there with Hector Lombard, victory over Lombard, Kelvin Gastelum, Johnny Hendricks back in the day. Just a lot of big recognizable names. And I just feel that Neil Magny is still fully devoured in the fight game. And I think he's hungrier than ever. So let's take a look at what we're talking about from as far as the betting lines are talking about for this fight here. On my bookie, Neil Magny opened as a minus 135 favorite, and he's now a minus 147 favorite. So the line, as of now, going towards Neil Magny's way. I think that's just based on the fact of the cardio, the grappling that he possesses, and of course the experience, the cage experience there. But Phil Rowe is a dangerous fighter. I wouldn't want to touch Neil Magny if this line gets ridiculous. I would like it more towards that minus 135 if you're going to be taking him. Minus 140, minus 145. Once you start talking about minus 155, 160, 165, if it touches 170, I don't know if they'll go all the way there, but I think that's a little out of hand if you ask me. Phil Rowe's dangerous, and he will have a potential avenue to win the striking exchanges with Neil Magny. Neil Magny will look to pepper him up, throw those little teeth kicks to the body, work the kicking game and the little pepper shots with his boxing. But Phil Rowe, a little bit more crisp and a little bit more decisive with his shots, so there's potential he lands some big shots there too. So be careful on what line you're grabbing, but Neil Magny is the way I'm going to go. I'm going to say he wins a decision. I think he digs deep and takes this fight and just changes levels and mix things up. You guys know I'm always harping on this UFC flyweight division. Well, this is a big matchup here between Tatsuro, Taira, and Kleydson Rodrigues. Now, this isn't a title eliminator type of matchup. This isn't even a matchup of two top 15 ranked fighters. But both of these kids are so promising. They're so young and talented. It's just a big match in the sense that the winner is really going to be taking some major momentum from this. And, the loser will have plenty of time to go back to the drawing board, but obviously they will lose some steam. Now, check this out. Before we jump into this fight, let's go take a look at the UFC's flyweight division. That's how excited I am to talk about it. We talk about the depth of some of these divisions. I cannot believe that Dana White and the UFC brass actually was considering getting rid of this flyweight division. Look at the depth here. First off, when you talk about the top 10, you're talking about a bunch of talented fighters, obviously very, very, very proven fighters. Brandon Moreno, Alexandria Pantoja. You got new blood in Pantoja as far as fighting for the belt. Al-Baziz coming off a big win. If you think he won that fight, Kai Kara France obviously still in the mix. Brandon Royval on a 3-fight winning streak. Davison Figueroa, whatever happens with him. Matheus Nicolau coming off a loss, but still so talented. Manil Cape. Now, as we slide through this division, look at these young and up-and-coming fighters that are so talented, just to understand the depth and the promise that this division has moving forward. The young, new blood that will work its way into the top 15 over time and keep this division interesting. Okay, Muhammad Makayev leading the charge as far as the Young Bucks go. I mean, do I need to say anything about that kid, man? Undefeated, the lengthy amateur resume. He's so talented. If you want to throw Tagar Ulanbekov's name in the mix, he's still decently interesting. Steve Urseg coming off a big UFC debut victory against a proven fighter and David Dvorak. Bruno Silva on a 3-fight winning streak. Hasn't been that active, but make no mistake, he's a very promising fighter. We're going to be talking about Tatsuro, Taira here. Let's keep looking. You got so many interesting names. Jake Hadley. Jake Hadley just signed an extension with the UFC. He'll be taking on Tagar Ulanbekov on August 5th. What else do we got here? Come on, I know we got some more names we could talk about. Kleydson Rodrigues. Charles Johnson coming off some losses, but all the way in the 29th spot. That's how deep this division is. That's what's crazy about it. How about Clayton Carpenter on the 34 mark here? A very young and promising fighter. Another name in the mix here. This division, in my mind, is just the most exciting division. You look at the top 50 here. Of course, we're talking about the UFC specifically, but even names outside the UFC. Recognizable names, interesting names all the way through it. So I'm just so excited with all those young and up and coming fighters. And this is a match here where you have two of them facing off early on in their careers. So Tatsuro Taira, 23 years old, obviously an unblemished record, one of the few undefeated fighters in the UFC. He's 13-0, coming off two submission victories coming off two decision victories there. Two submission victories in his last two fights, and then also had a decision victory in his debut against Carlos Candelario, submitting CJ Vergara and Jesus Aguilar in his last two fights. Aguilar, a tough customer. CJ Vergara, an underrated and tough customer, a common opponent of Kleydson Rodrigues's. And in fact, He has a victory over Kleydson Rodrigues. That was a split decision victory where he defeated him there. So that's the one little blemish on Rodrigues' resume as of recently, and he bounced back with a major KO victory over Shannon Ross, a proven veteran. After that, just to kind of solidify things. If you thought maybe he was just an overhyped fighter, no, he is a very talented fighter. You saw the way he went out there and starched him. Kleydson Rodrigues is a fighter that has very dangerous striking. He's very technical, has a lot of pop on his shots. He's a well-rounded fighter. He has jiu-jitsu skills, and that's what makes him such a threat, man. He's an explosive fighter. He's a well-rounded fighter. The same can be said for Taira here. But I would say that Taira's main strength is his submission skills. He is a very, very high caliber Brazilian jiu-jitsu player. When he's down on the mat, he will snatch your back up. He will lock in a variety of submissions on you. And I think that's what really makes him such a threat in this division. I think that he will end up submitting a lot of fighters. But on the feet, he's lengthy as well. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage here. He'll also have about a 1-inch height advantage. He's a lengthy fighter. He knows how to use that length. He has a good jab. He has good boxing. But he gets inside on these fighters, and he tends to get to their back. And he has 7 submission victories and 13 wins. So just slightly more than half of his victories have come by way of submission. I mean, he's a dangerous fighter. Let's just talk about the variety of subs that he's pulling off too, just to understand what he has in his arsenal. Pulling off a triangle mixed with the armbar there in his last fight, pulled off the armbar against Vergara, rear naked chokes, triangle chokes, even finishing, some of his opponents down on the mat with some ground and pound, a front choke, another triangle choke. I mean, he is very polished there. So, I won't go on too much more about this fight here. Obviously, I'm very excited for it. Tatsuro, only 23 years old, so he has so much more room for growth as well. I think that he is one of the most promising fighters in the game right now. You have that common opponent you could work with if you want to use some MMA math, whatever. Take that for what it is. He made quick work of CJ Vergara, while Kleydson struggled a little bit in that fight with Vergara, right? He could have done more. Even if he thought he took that fight, he could have definitely done more. I think that Taira is going to be the more well-rounded fighter. I think he could strike with Kleydson, even though he has to be careful because Kleydson can starch him. But I think that Taira will weather the storm there. He'll be cerebral, and eventually I think that he'll get the better of some grappling exchanges. I think that this fight will change levels. He'll touch the mat, and I think that if you go down to the mat with a kid like Taira, you could be in some big trouble. I could see him snatching up Rodrigues' back. Now, Rodrigues has never been submitted. He's only lost via decision. But you know what? Taira is always live to pull off a sub or get a finish in a variety of ways because he is always on the attack. But, it's the flyweight division. Rodrigues has shown to be tough. It might not be the best bet to go for that finish there, but overall, I'm taking Taira to get the job done. And let's go take a look at the betting line. I'm excited about this one here. Tatsuro, Taira right now. Whoa, look at this. On my bookie, he opened up as a minus 384 favorite. He's now a 4-1 favorite. He's a minus 400 favorite currently. And on some books, we see him at that minus 330, 340 range. You're probably going to expect to see those books catch up to my bookie. They'll probably be around that 370, 380 range at least. Coming in as another big-time favorite, you just have to understand that Rodrigues is the real deal, and he's a true threat in this fight. But I think that Taira gets the job done. I'm not necessarily crazy about that line because I think it's a little bit steep when you understand how dangerous Rodrigues is. And I know he had that hiccup against Vergara, but I think that was just a little bit of an off night. And I think now he has his feet wet in the octagon. He's also very young, so you might see some major growth from him here and see him just a lot more comfortable in the cage and looking to land some heavy leg kicks and land some big shots in the feet. It's the flyweight division. You're not talking about heavy dudes that are necessarily going out there starching each other fight to fight, but it's still the fight game, and you don't be surprised if you see a finish here as they look to have lightning fast exchanges on the feet as well. But give me Taira. I will take him to win this fight via decision. I think he digs deep and maybe controls the back. Maybe Rodrigues survives those positions there, but I think Taira gets the job done. Very excited for that fight there. In the featherweight division, we got David Onama taking on Gabriel Santos. As I've been going off on the mic about some of these young and promising fighters throughout this fight card, I want to make it clear, Gabriel Santos is another one of those types of dudes. His debut was outstanding, in my opinion. I felt that he was robbed of a victory against a proven veteran and a very dangerous fighter in Leron Murphy. Real quick before we jump into this matchup, we could check the numbers. I know he was slightly outlanded by Murphy, but solidifying 5 of those 11 takedowns, the control time, over 4 minutes of control time throughout that fight. 1/3 of the fight, he was in control of Murphy down on the mat. I did feel that was a robbery. I was very disappointed for him, going into that fight. He was undefeated, and obviously being his UFC debut, I mean, what a disappointing decision for him there. But he's the type of kid that just goes, right back to work, and he looks to continue to refine his craft. So I think that he'll be absolutely fine here. He'll be just as hungry as ever. I don't think he'll let this moment get to him. I think he comes out and shines in this fight. Now he has a very tough opponent in front of him, David Onama, a very well-rounded fighter as well. He's a solid fighter. He's a legit UFC fighter. He's had some losses as of recently. At one point in time, he did have James Krause in his corner. So he's been going through some things, obviously, over the last couple of years with James Krause. Now, James Krause is probably tuning into the fights from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. I haven't heard from him in a while. He was messing around with some of the wrong people and doing some of the wrong things, I guess you would say. But in reality, the coaching changes that he's gone through over the last couple of years, I think that does impact the fighter. And James Krause, I believe, was very heavily involved in what Onama had going on. And even though I poked some fun at Krause and whatnot, I think that Krause was one of the better coaches in the game. So, that obviously had an influence on Onama. Onama right now is coming off a loss to Nate Landwehr. Nate Landwehr is a tough fighter. Before that, he had a victory over Garrett Armfield and Gabriel Benitez. Not too crazy about the level of competition there. Then he lost to Mason Jones, a good fighter as well. Really not any big-time victories in Onama's resume, in my opinion, even though I still think that he's a good fighter. He's a good fighter. I do believe that Gabriel Santos will be better overall. Really, anywhere this fight goes, I think down on the mat, he's better. I think that he'll get the better of the striking exchanges, even though Onama's going to have about a 3-inch reach advantage. I'm not too worried about that. I think that Gabriel Santos will just prove to be quicker to the punch, quicker to the strike, quicker to transitioning, quicker to all types of grappling. I think he'll just be the better fighter here. And I think that it's going to be tougher for us to not see Santos get his hand raised now going into this fight, where now he's already had his feet wet in the octagon as well. I think he'll be even more comfortable this time around. He knows what it's all about. And I am on Santos here. And just to take a look at some of the work he's done in his 10 victories, a diverse amount of finishes, 2 KOs, 3 subs, three decisions as well. I know that only adds up to 8. Sometimes, like I said, these earlier fights, they won't register the method of victory in some of these very early on fights. But Gabriel Santos is a very diverse fighter, has that 1 decision loss. David Onama has never been finished, only lost 2 decisions as well as of recently. So 2 very tough fighters. I just think that Gabriel Santos will be a step ahead. I think he's quicker, like I said, and I think that he gets the job done here against Onama. And let's go take a look at the betting line before we rant too much about this fight. Right now, Gabriel Santos, he is a minus 238. Opened as a minus 238. It dipped down to a minus 232 line and then back to a 238. Not a lot of line movement there. But again, you see the level of respect that people have for this young kid as he's only going into his 2nd fight. He's still so young, and he's coming in over a 2-1 favorite, a 2.5-1 favorite here. And just to be clear, a 26-year-old fighter that has so much more room for growth. I think that he gets the job done. It's going to be hard to favor him getting that finish just based on the fact that Onama has shown to be durable and tough. So I'll favor more the decision. I mean, I got to see chink in Onama's armor there as far as his durability before I'm going to fade him as far as getting finished. He's shown to be pretty damn tough. So I'll say it goes to a decision, but Santos will be a step ahead. Hey, guys, if you're looking for a new sports book, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I will give you my referral link. You will get an added bonus to your account, and I will give you a free betting package for any card that you want. I use Bovada.lv. I think it's the best sports book out there. Great payouts. Everything's super easy. Everything is aesthetically pleasing on the site. Everything works perfectly. And if you guys have any questions, reach out to me. And I'm here if you're interested. Shoot me a message, whether it's email, scrolling below, DM me on Instagram or Twitter. The number 15th ranked strawweight, Tabatha Ricci, taking on Gillian Robertson. Excellent matchmaking here. Both fighters 28 years old. Both fighters very dangerous. Both of them have very good grappling. I love the matchup here. You got to kind of pick your poison. Do you want that Nesquik light brown chocolate milkshake, or do you want the strawberry chocolate milkshake? In Gillian Robertson's case, the strawberry milkshake's looking pretty good these days, but not that I mind that nice light chocolate milkshake either. Both these fighters, like I said, man, looking really good as of recently. Gillian Robertson was just on the Joe Rogan Experience as well, so if you guys want to check her out there and get to know her on a more personal level, a really cool chick. You see her here swimming with the sharks, which is kind of interesting, right? Because now she's facing off with the baby shark and Tabatha Ricci. Gillian Robertson, without a doubt, her strength is her grappling. You take into consideration, even on the grappling scene, she has submission victories over the former champion Rose Namajunas. She's just very dangerous there. She just came a long way from this Gillian Robertson to the current one. And, some lucky guy probably snatched her up at this point, and now he has this one here. Not that that's her best picture, but you guys know what I'm saying there. I just want to talk about some of her submission victories in the octagon because she has quite a few. Coming off a submission victory over Piera Rodrigues, P-Rod, who's a good fighter, the Venezuelan fighter there, submitted Maria Agapova, a submission victory over Priscilla Cachoeira. Let's see, we can keep talking some submission victories. A submission victory over Pearl Gonzalez. Let's see, what else? I got more for you. A submission victory over Courtney Casey. Come on, I got more for you. She knocked Sarah Frota out. Submission victory over Veronica Hardy. With the name change, with Veronica Macedo changing her name. The submission victory over Molly McCann way back in the day. A submission victory over Emily Whitmire back in the day. A submission victory over Hannah Cyphers back in the day. And then, I don't need to go through her regional record, but you guys understand what I'm saying. She is a serious grappler. I really believe that. Listening to her talk about the grappling game with Joe Rogan too, you understand how serious she takes her grappling and how refined she is with all that. Well, guess what? Tabatha Ricci is a very polished Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player as well. I'm very interested to see how this fight plays out down on the mat because I know that Ricci can hang with anybody down on the mat as well. So interested to see that. I think that Ricci's been looking very good with her striking as well. Comes in phenomenal shape. I'm really torn on who I want to pick in this spot here. I'm just really high on both these fighters. Ricci's one loss was against an extremely high-level opponent in Manon Farot, where she got knocked out there. That was her UFC debut fight. Maybe even taking that fight on short notice, if I remember correctly. But still, a very, very tough debut fight there. Then victories over Jessica Penne, who she just submitted. Victories over Pauliana Viana and Maria Oliveira. I think that this fight will touch the mat. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I think it will touch the mat, and I'm really excited to see who gets the better of that. But I think that Ricci may be a little bit of a step ahead, at range on the feet with her striking and with using her foot movement. She's really quick there. If you want to take a look real quickly at some of the losses that Gillian Robertson has had, she just lost recently to JJ Aldrich. Aldrich, a little bit of a flaky fighter, good boxing, tricky southpaw, but that's a fight that you would think that at this point in time Ricci would probably take. So I do believe that there's an avenue to go out there and defeat her. And, losses to Miranda Maverick, Talia Santos, Macy Barber. She got knocked out by Macy Barber. I think that I'm going to edge Tabatha Ricci on the feet. And being that she is a polished grappler as well, I think that she could hang with Robertson down there, maybe even gets the better. I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. But I will edge Tabatha Ricci, the baby shark here, who is a very slight favorite right now. She opened as a -144. She's now a -135, which is to be expected, right? This line should be closer to even odds. I think the value would be in the dog on Gillian Robertson at this point at a +106 line. Or, if you can get it at +113 like it opened, I think that's where the value is. But I'll say that Ricci should maybe be like a -120 favorite, an ever so slight favorite here. Based on what I've seen on tape and how they're looking going into this fight. But a great fight. Give me Ricci, though. Remember earlier when I stated that this card is filled with high-caliber opponents that are not necessarily the most known at this current time. Again, you guys are probably familiar with these guys, at least to an extent, right? Mateusz Rębecki, coming off Dana White's Contender Series, he was an absolute bully, had had success in the octagon since then as well. And then you got Loik Radzhabov, a guy that is just an outstanding fighter coming over from the PFL, takes a short notice fight in his UFC debut and does enough to get the job done. These are two very high caliber opponents. They're in their 30s at this point in time. They're cruising into the primes of their career. This is a legit clash right here. You got, and both of them have a good amount of experience too. Rębecki with 18 pro fights, Loik with 21 pro fights. I mean, this is just two steamroller trucks just going max speed, flashing into each other. So we'll see who gets the worst of this collision here. I'm very high on both of these fighters. We could talk about Rębecki here for a second. I mentioned how he absolutely bullied his opponent on Dana White's Contender Series. Eventually submitted him after a couple of minutes in Rodrigo Lidio. I mean, he was just, it looked like he was a man amongst boys in that fight, quite literally. And I think you could say the same thing against Nick Fiore, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in his UFC debut. He was just a man amongst boys in that matchup there. I don't expect that to necessarily be the case with his opponent here, because Loik Radzhabov is a very proven fighter, a very well-rounded fighter. Even in his UFC debut against Esteban Robovics, in a fight that played out closer than probably a lot of people thought, because he went into that fight even in his debut as the favorite. He showed that he has very solid takedown defense. In fact, I believe he stuffed every takedown attempt that was thrown his way in that fight, and there was a good amount of them thrown towards his way. And I think that takedown defense will be key for him in this matchup. It will have to check out once again. He has to keep Rębecki off him, and if Rębecki keeps shooting and doesn't have success, and that will drain the gas tank a little bit. And I think that Loik can get the best of him on the feet. We know that he's also been training over at Team Killcliff with Henry Hooft for some time right now as well. So great striking, and I do edge Loik in a striking type of affair. But again, this isn't a kickboxing match, and Rębecki's going to be coming forward like a pit bull, and he carries some serious power as well. 8 knockouts out of his 17 wins, about half of his victories coming by way of knockout, 6 submissions. He's a fight finisher. I'm very excited to see how this fight plays out, and you also need to take note that Loik here, he's not taking this fight on last-minute short notice, so he'll come in better shape, and I think he won't be breathing as heavily as he was against Esteban there. So my pick is going to be Mateusz Rębecki. I like this guy. I have a lot of respect for Loik as well, but I think the pressure of Rębecki may be what is the deciding factor in this fight. It probably plays out to be very close. I think that Loik's going to land some big shots on him as well. But if Mateusz survives all that, he has shown to be a pretty durable fighter. He's only lost once, and that one loss was via knockout. But you know what? That was quite a bit of a time ago, back in 2014, by Paweł Ilek. Got knocked out in the second round, a fellow Polish fighter. And, I think overall, though, he's shown to have a pretty good chin. I think that he could weather the storm here. And I'm going to go Rębecki in this spot here. Again, we talked about the takedown defense of Loik. He's 100% takedown defensive rate. Just one fight, though. Takedown accuracy of Rębecki's at 62%. I would like to see Rębecki changing levels and have some success with the takedowns, but also just pressuring in this fight where he can land some heavy leg kicks and all that as well. So, you see the volume is up for sure, almost 5 significant strikes, or 5 strikes landed per minute compared to Loik's 2.67 in that last fight. And also, I'll just throw this in real quick before we get to the betting line. Esteban Robovics, a fighter that definitely looked good in that fight against Loik, right? Some people thought he could have potentially took that victory there. He wasn't really the most hyped up or respected fighter going into that fight. So you got to kind of wonder what level Esteban was as far as his skill level goes. And then Rębecki may be a step up there, but that's to be determined, because the book's not on Esteban too. He's young, so maybe he just is a high caliber fighter that's been kind of going under the radar. But I think we need to see a better version of Loik if he's going to hang with Rębecki, but has a full camp for this fight, and he should be a better version of himself. Let's go take a look at the betting line here. This should be interesting. The line's very close. Mateusz Rębecki opens as a -138, and we see action going towards Loik's way here, as we saw Rębecki touch -131. He goes back to a -135 line. Let me see something here. Check this out real quick. Yeah, if you guys can see this, I don't know if you can see it, but on Bet Online, Rębecki opened as a -220 favorite, and that has dipped all the way down to a -125. So major action coming in on Loik. And at one point in time, Rębecki was a +101. That's major line movement, going from a -220 all the way to an underdog +101. It's towards the left of the screen. Not sure if you could see that, but take my word for it. On some of these books that open the lines very early, some of them, some interesting line openers there. That line should never have been there for sure. I mean, you got to put some more respect on Loik's name, but I do like Rębecki. I think the minus 135 line is an accurate line on Rębecki at this point in time. I do believe that that's an accurate line. He will be a little bit undersized. Also take that into consideration, even though he looks like he's a man amongst boys most of the time. Loik's going to actually have about a 3.5-inch height advantage. He'll also have a 2-inch reach advantage. And he's a grown man, 32 years old. So this is an interesting fight. I'm going to pick Mateusz Rębecki to get the job done here in a very, very toughly fought fight. I'll take Rębecki via decision. Brendan All-In Allen, the current number 13th ranked middleweight fighter in the UFC, taking on Bruno Silva, one of two Bruno Silvas in the UFC. We're talking about the middleweight version here, not the flyweight version. Bruno Silva has proven to be a heavy hitter. This is a guy that can go out there and knock your block off. This is a guy that has stood in the pocket and traded with Alex Pereira. Not a lot of men can say that they've done that and didn't get finished. So you understand the level of talent of his striking. He's a decently well-rounded fighter, very tough. He's a dangerous opponent for anybody. And right now he's fighting, I don't know if you would say with his back against the wall, but he's tasted defeat a little bit as of recently, and he does need a W. So he's a very hungry fighter coming in to this match. On the other hand, Brendan Allen is extremely confident going into this fight. He's really hitting his stride. This is a fighter that we always knew had some real promise. If you guys remember, he fought on Dana White's Contender Series. I believe he fought Kyle Dawkins, and Kyle Dawkins was actually having some success early on. What was teeing off on him. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I don't believe it was Kyle Dawkins. Give me a second here, guys. Sorry about that. It was Aaron Jeffrey. For some reason, I confused all these guys. Aaron Jeffrey was having a lot of success over in Bellator, and he's a phenomenal fighter. Aaron Jeffrey was teeing off on Brendan Allen early on in that fight. And in that fight, you really got an idea of exactly the type of fighter that Allen is. He's a very calm and composed fighter. Sometimes that goes to his detriment because we've seen him finish in those types of situations too. But he was very calm and composed and eventually looked for the counter shot and he got the job done in that fight there. Where he actually submitted Aaron Jeffrey, hit him with a counter hook, and then submitted him in the first round. Then he went out there, submitted Kevin Holland, knocked out Tom Breeze, had the tough fight with Kyle Dawkins there. That was the fight where Kyle Dawkins dug deep late and took the third round, but Allen was up on the scorecards from the first 2 rounds. Now, again, when you talk about Allen starting off a little slow, in the Sean Strickland fight, he started off slow and was hurt with some big shots early on and then was continuously teed off on until he was eventually finished in the start of the second round. That was a fight where his calmness and the way he likes to feel fighters out and just kind of try to see things in slow motion, it kind of hurt him there. And I think that he has to be careful in this spot too, because if he's just being patient out there and looking for his counter shots, Bruno Silva can look to tee off on you as well. He bounced back with the submission victory over Carl Robertson, a victory over Punale Seriano. He was knocked out by Chris Curtis, once again talking about how he could be a little bit defensively flawed at times, has a big old noggin that's there to be hit too. But after that, submitted Sam Alvey, had the decision with victory over Jacob Malkoun, which a lot of people thought Malkoun should have got the nod there, submitted Christoph Jaku, and then he just went out there and submitted Andre Muniz. Now, that was the big victory, right? Because Muniz is the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu star in the division, and Allen basically said, no, I'm the Jiu-Jitsu guy in this division. So, a phenomenal grappler. I think he has underrated striking as well. Been working with Henry Hoof for a long time. And check this out. Brendan Allen is still only 27 years old, so still a very young fighter in the division, has plenty of room for growth. This is a guy that thinks he'll be fighting for the belt in the near future. He needs to get a victory here against Silva first. I do believe that's a very likely scenario. If he fights an intelligent fight, does Allen, I think he can defeat this man here and Bruno Silva. And, Bruno Silva, he'll be pressuring. He'll be looking to get that knockout like he did in his last fight against Brad Tavares. But you take a look at the Gerald Mearshart fight where he was submitted. Did take the L against Alex Pereira, a very, very, very talented striker there. So maybe not as much shame in that loss there. But wasn't able to have success with the takedowns and the grappling like maybe some people think that he should have, like I thought he should have. And then knockouts against Andrew Sanchez, Jordan Wright, Wellington Turman, again, showing the knockout power that he has a knockout over Alexander Shlemenko, a very respected fighter who's up in age, but way past his prime. But in his heyday, man, he was a hell of a fighter. That was back in 2018. Bruno Silva is a dangerous fighter. I think that Allen can weather that storm and fight a cerebral fight here and avoid the knockout, where I think he gets this fight down to the mat at one point in time and will thrive with the grappling. And I'll say Brendan Allen pulls off the submission in this fight. If he can submit a guy, some of the guys that we've talked about, I think that Bruno Silva can be submitted as well. And just real quick, I just want to reiterate, he was just submitted by Gerald Mearshart, one of the top submission artists in the game. And Bruno Silva just submitted Andre Muniz, who may have been the best jiu-jitsu guy in the division at that point in time. So I'm going to go submission Brendan Allen, excuse me here. And I'm going to pull up the betting line. Let's talk about this betting line. Brendan Allen is a minus 178 favorite on my bookie, opened as a minus 196. So action coming towards Bruno Silva's way. Brendan Allen he opened up as a minus 300 favorite on Bet Online. He's now a minus 156 there. So action definitely going towards Bruno Silva's way. But that was just the line correcting itself because it opened up too high. Brendan Allen should be, in my opinion, right around a minus 175 favorite, a minus 170 favorite for this fight. I think that's an accurate line. Bruno Silva's dangerous. He can go out here and talked about how Allen freezes up a little bit at times and has that big old noggin. Silva does have potential to knock him out in this fight. But I'll favor the grappling of Allen's. I think he gets the job done. I like that line at that minus 170 mark. Try to get it right around that range there. You like Allen. Also, if you're looking for props in this fight, you're going to want to target the unders and finishing type props in this fight. I think that we see a finish in this fight. I think that this fight I think this fight doesn't reach the third round. I think we see a finish by the end of the second round. In the middleweight division, we got Punahele Soriano taking on Cedriques Dumas. As of now, this is slated to be on the main card. I find that to be a little interesting. I understand that both these guys bring the fight. Maybe that's the route they're going. They just know we're going to see a knockout or some type of crazy action. But, I don't know if these fighters have proven to be deserving of a spot like this on ABC, but it will be a fun fight. Dumas showing to be a striker, showing to be a guy that also has some submission skills as well. I mean, he hurt Mateusz Panaz in that fight and eventually submitted him there. Panaz was a fighter that was very hyped up going into that Contender Series fight. Panaz was the favorite. Believe he was undefeated at the time. And then after that, Dumas gets an opportunity to fight in the octagon, and he gets submitted by Josh Fremd. So Josh Fremd, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really too high on him, to be honest. I know he has some sub skills, but on the other hand, Punahele Soriano, this guy has no cardio. You never know what version you're getting of him. I mean, yeah, he goes out there and he looks to knock his opponent's head off, and it's nice if he could land like he did against Dusko Jadrovic, the walking punching bag, or Oscar Pichota, a guy that disappeared from the game. Back to the regional scene where he had a victory over Jonathan Patti, a guy that's talented but comes in not in the best shape and whatnot. Victories over Jamie Pickett, not too high on him. I think that Soriano's an overrated fighter at this point in time. I think that he's not the most cerebral fighter. I don't like the training that he's been putting in. I think that he should have been refining his game, his fighting style and his game in a different type of way than he has. At least I haven't seen the growth in his game. Doesn't seem to have the highest fighter IQ either. I would like to see him be more patient at times and learn how to manage his gas tank. And but then you got a fighter. And we'll go back to Cedriques Dumas. This is a fighter that I don't even know he should even be in this spot right now. He's 27 years old. He only has 8 pro fights. Just got outclassed by Fremd or submitted by Fremd. And then before that, victories against lower level fighters. I mean, maybe he just caught Mateusz Panaz on a bad day. And maybe Panaz wasn't as good as we thought he was, even though he seems to be somewhat promising. But maybe he just caught him on a bad day. He made a mistake and he capitalized. I mean, is this a fighter that is supposed to be on this stage taking on a guy in Soriano that at the very least you could say Soriano's been in the octagon and he's battle tested against some reputable opponents more so than Dumas? That's why I got to favor Soriano here, and I think that they throw down, and I think there's a realistic possibility that Soriano gets on the inside and lands one of those Mike Tyson type shots. He's very reminiscent to like a southpaw Tyson in there. Take that with a grain of salt, but you guys know what I'm saying. And he throws some heavy hooks, uses his footwork to get in early. But if he doesn't land that knockout early, I favor Dumas's cardio more so than him. And that's saying something because I don't even really know how polished of an athlete Dumas is. I mean, you see him in the garage hitting pads here. I mean, this isn't some guy that's a very polished fighter that's training, with some of the stars of the game. I feel like he's a fighter that's just looking to make it work, coming from a lower level scene, hitting pads in the garage and whatnot. So this is going to be a huge stage for him. I got to favor Soriano just based on that, in my opinion, but I don't say it with any type of confidence. And we'll go take a look at the betting line and see if it's absurd or not, because Soriano right now is a minus 222 on my bookie. I don't like that line at all. I don't even like the minus 181 line. So you guys know I'm clearly stating that there's value on Cedriques Dumas. I do believe that. I think that if this fight goes into the second, the third rounds, I think that Dumas takes this fight over. There's just constant errors in Seriano's game in the cage, and I think that even a guy like Dumas can potentially bring that out of him. And Dumas is a rangy fighter. He's gonna have a almost a 6-inch reach advantage here. What, a 6.5-inch reach advantage? Okay, he's a lengthy dude. He's taller. He seems to be pretty talented on the feet. He seems to have some submission skills. We've seen him pull off the sub. Should I go with Cedriques Dumas to get the job done? I mean, the value is clearly on Dumas. I think Seriano probably uses the veteran gameship and some of the experience that he has to finally put it together to get a victory here, and may even land that big shot. But the value is on Dumas. If any of you guys are messing around with that Seriano line, I disagree with what you're going after there. In the flyweight division, we got Amanda Ribas taking on Maycee Barber. We know that Amanda Ribas spent a significant amount of time in the strawweight division, and she's more recently been fighting in the flyweight division. I think it's looked like that was a good move. Some of the issues that we've seen with Amanda Ribas is her durability. I mean, her striking defense is still bad. It's still not there, and she will eat shots. But the fact that she's not cutting as much weight allows her to be a little bit more durable in there, and for her to use her wearing style of just continuously going forward and putting all that volume on you, or eventually mixing in a takedown or two and trying to use her grappling. We know she's a very polished Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player. We know that her dad's a very respected man in the Jiu-Jitsu world. I think that Ribas will have a clear edge if this fight goes down to the mat. I know that Maycee Barber is a tough wrestler. She's very physically strong. But I think that if this fight goes down to the mat, she's going to be in serious trouble. And I wouldn't have felt that way as much from what I've seen from her in the past. But what I saw from her in her last fight against Andrea Lee, that was where the problem was. I mean, that was a fight that everybody agrees she should have lost. Somehow she squeaked out the decision. She does throw very damaging blows. She's very ferocious. I love that about Maycee. But I didn't like the way that she was laying on her back for the majority of that fight. And against a fighter like Amanda Ribas, I think that that's even a more dangerous proposition, because Amanda Ribas is a better grappler, in my opinion, than an Andrea Lee. So Maycee Barber, the current number 11th ranked flyweight fighter, should have lost to Andrea Lee, had a decision victory over Jessica Ai, a decision over Montana De La Rosa, and a decision victory over Miranda Maverick, where she should have lost that fight. So she should have been on a 3-fight losing skid from Roxanne Modafferi, Grasso, the champ, and then Maverick, and then lower level wins over Montana De La Rosa and Jessica Ai. So although I like what I've been seeing from her in the cage in some aspects, with the way she throws her power hooks and the way she uses her footwork, and she's explosive, I think that she has the potential to land those damaging shots on her opposition compared to the rest of the level of talent in the division. And Amanda Ribas will be here to be hit. There's potential that Maycee Barber can drop her, knock her out, or really bloody her up. But that being said, the threat of Amanda Ribas eventually getting this fight down to the mat and really ending this fight with a submission or just dominating down on the mat, it outweighs that potential from Barber, in my opinion. So even though I really wanted to take the stab at the dog here and pick Barber, I can't after the performance that Barber just had. This is cut and dry for me. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in Amanda Ribas has that edge there. She'll have a 1-inch reach advantage, even though she's an inch shorter than Barber. Barber will try to stifle Amanda Ribas, hold her up against the cage. She'll break off. She'll throw nasty elbows. She'll throw those power hooks. But one little mistake in the clinch or at bay, and if Amanda Ribas trips her down or gets a takedown and gets on top, it could be a quick night for Maycee Barber, or we could just see domination on Amanda Ribas' part over Barber, and we could see Barber start to breathe heavy as he's trying to get up and struggling there. Give me Amanda Ribas. I had a little bit of a change of heart on my decision here. I initially was going to pick Barber, but I'm not going to pick her. I got to go at Ribas again. Just rewatching that tape of the Andrea Lee fight. Amanda Ribas right now is a -175 favorite. Opened as a -153, is now a -175 on my bookie. So action coming in on Amanda Ribas. They're looking at the grappling avenue of this matchup here, and people are feeling that Ribas could have some serious success there and maybe even pulls off a sub or dominates. Give me Amanda Ribas. I'm in agreement there. If you guys are looking to work with me for my official plays, you guys know that offer is always there. If you guys are interested in my pricing, shoot me a message through email, DM me on Instagram or Twitter. Like always, I'm available through a variety of ways. Shoot me a message. I'll give you my price, and this is going to be a big weekend coming up. That takes us over to the main event where we have Josh Emmett, the number 5th ranked featherweight, taking on the number 9th ranked featherweight, and Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria is pushing his way towards eventually fighting for gold. Only 26 years old, such a dangerous fighter. We saw how he just looked against Bryce Mitchell. Great takedown defense, great grappling, knockout power, checks off so many boxes. The same could be said about Josh Emmett. I just think that it's at a little bit of a lower level compared to Ilia Topuria, still at an extremely high level. But Topuria, to me, has shown to be a little bit of a more polished overall fighter. But more importantly, he's cruising into the prime of his career. He's a young buck. Josh Emmett nearing 40 years old. He's 38. It's just, I know he looks to be in phenomenal shape, but there's just no way that he could be as fresh of a fighter as a Topuria, in my opinion. Josh Emmett, great grappling, but I'm going to give the edge to Topuria here. I think if we see a fighter on top of the other, it's going to be Topuria that will be on top of Emmett, smashing him down. But for the most part, I think that these two fighters are going to be trading on the feet. Josh Emmett has shown that he is more than willing to exchange, and he has big-time knockout power. He'll be looking for that knockout blow. You saw in his last fight, though, against Yair Rodrigues, that the new young blood, that diverse striking can be a little bit of an issue for Josh Emmett, where Josh Emmett's kind of looking for that knockout overhand right at times, throwing some leg kicks in there and just looking for that knockout blow. If he doesn't get that knockout, he tends to be peppered up a little bit. And that's kind of how I see this fight going down. I think that the Matador is going to be using this Conor McGregor head movement, as you see here. He's got his McGregor swag on with the watch and the collar shirt, doing his little bobble over there. As maybe they're putting down a couple of drinks, but Topuria is a stud. He's an absolute stud. I would love to see him get the opportunity to starch Paddy Pimblett. I don't think Pimblett would ever have the balls to step in the cage with him there. So, maybe one day we're lucky enough to see that, but in the meantime, probably not. Ilia Topuria, just real quick, you want to talk about some of his victories. We talked about the Bryce Mitchell submission victory, dominating with the grappling, the knockout over Jai Herbert, knocking out Ryan Hall, knocking out Damon Jackson, defeating Yusuf Zalal. It doesn't have a huge list as of now, but when you know what you're watching and you're breaking down tape on them, when you're watching these fights live, we know what we're seeing here. This is an absolute stud. The Georgian fighter, easily a potential future champion. And I want to talk about, let's take a look at this. This is always fun. Let's go slide over to the rankings in the division so you kind of understand where Topuria is at right now. Yair Rodrigues is going to be fighting with Volkanovski, so they could settle who's the current best featherweight in the world. Yair Rodrigues is on fire. Volkanovski, the best pound-for-pound fighter, in my opinion. And then you got Max Holloway, who's coming off that victory against Arnold Allen. So Arnold's on ice right now. And then you got Movsar Evlovoyov, who's also a stud. I would love to see Topuria get this victory, and then I would love to see Topuria fight Movsar. But then you also have Max Holloway in the mix as well. So we'll see how they work that. But those are the fighters right now that we're talking about, right? It's Max Holloway, Yair Rodrigues, Alexander Volkanovski, and then you got Ilia Topuria and Movsar as that new blood that's going to look to work their way towards a title shot. So I'm excited to see this all unravel. I got El Matador to get the job done here. I think that he gets a knockout on the feet. I think that they trade for a while. They throw big shots. I think that Emmett slows down a little bit. I think Ilia Topuria's straighter shots, his more crisp boxing, more technical striking will pay dividends as well. And we've seen Josh Emmett get knocked out. In fact, I saw Josh Emmett get knocked out live. I saw him get knocked out against Jeremy Stevens in the second round there. Bounce back, with some solid victories, but we saw him submitted against Yair Rodrigues, kind of broke down in that fight. He had a lot of big shots in that fight, got kicked up, boxed up. And I'm seeing something similar happen here with Ilia Topuria just being a step ahead. Ilia Topuria right now on my bookie is a minus 333. He opened up as a 322, so slight movement there. We could check Bet Online, which opens these books a little earlier. Opened as a minus 300 favorite, now a minus 310, so action still going his way. It's a high line. You would have to mix it in a parlay. So you want to snatch it somewhere from that minus 300 to minus 340 range. Anything 350, 360, I think you're getting a little reckless, and you have the opportunity there to parlay that early on. At the end of the day, I just think that Topuria gets the job done, but we also respect Emmett. He's a true veteran. He's a bull, and he'll be throwing big shots early. But Topuria to get the job done via knockout. I think this fight ends before the third round finishes in a 5-round main event. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC on ABC 5. Excited for this fight card. Like I said, an underrated fight card. Got to hit you guys with some parting words. You know, I found this interesting. I heard some crazy stat about 30-something% of people, you guys can look up the number or whatnot, but a good amount of people actually don't conversate with themselves in their mind. I thought this was very interesting because I'm somebody that's just constantly conversating with myself in my mind, no matter where I am. I mean, I'm just constantly having conversations in my mind. In fact, I can't stop the voice in my head. And I don't say that like some crazy voice in my head. I mean it as like in a good way, right? Just a voice that's kind of keeping you grounded, you know, analyzing your scenarios when you're out and about. A voice that keeps you grounded as far as things you need to get done, things you're working on. You know, if you're one of those 30-something% that just, you know, walk around like a rooster or just like an ant and just going through the motions, man, and just eating your food and drooling out of your mouth while you're watching TV, I'm sorry to hear that, and not to offend, because I'm sure obviously statistically some of you guys are those people, but maybe try conversating in your mind if you're not already, because it helps you in such a variety of ways. You need to spell out what you're doing. You need to see what you're doing. It's just, it's almost like organization, like writing your ideas out, you know, as you're looking to do things. And again, this goes from complicated things you're working on in the future, planning them in your mind, planning things, thinking about things as you're looking forward to those things, or even just to simple situations and simple awareness of your surroundings, whether it's in the form of danger around you and scenarios. Just, I think you should work on conversating in your own mind and having that best friend in your mind. It sounds kind of weird. I know some people get a little uncomfortable thinking of like having a voice or a voice or another person that you're talking with in your brain. Understand, it's just you. You're conversating with yourself, but you are your best friend. And that's, I think that's something you guys should all take into consideration if you haven't already. Another thing too, man, if any of you guys have been going through rough times, when I've gone through some of my more rough times throughout my life, some more depressing times, if you want to call it that or whatever, I always gravitate towards conversating with myself even more so, and just calming myself through situations and having myself there, having yourself as your best friend to go through difficult times. That's something serious. That's worked for me in a major way. You're never alone if you always understand you have yourself, right? So think about that. I'm sure some of you guys can relate to that. And again, for all you guys that are walking around like anteaters, you know what you're walking around like? You're walking around like an armadillo at 3 o'clock at night, just with your head down, sniffing the concrete, looking for a cockroach to eat. You don't want to be like that. So open your mind up. You want to evolve to be a very thinking type of person. So think about that. Of course, all in good fun. Sorry for you armadillos out there. Much love to all you. I'll sign out on that note. All right, guys, signing out. Bella.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.